The new book is called Crime in Progress: Inside the Steele Dossier and the Fusion GPS Investigation of Donald Trump. Fusion GPS has been turned into an epithet in the mouths of House Republicans and some Senate Republicans in trying to essentially blame you guys for having invented the myth that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. You write about how being aware at the time when you guys were doing your work that there was going to be blowback, that you would become targets. You write in very serious terms about the risks to the sources who were used to collect some of this information. Did you anticipate that your lives would be transformed to the degree they have?
I mean, we knew that would happen once the dossier was published by BuzzFeed in January of 2017. But I don't know if we were, as former journalists, we were that well prepared for the scale and the venality of the lies being told on the right about us. And the willingness of the Republicans to put party before country.
I mean, so I went to college in Washington. I basically spent most of my professional life in Washington covering scandals. And so there was some ability to anticipate what might happen to us in terms of investigations and legal costs and all of that. But this is so off the charts of anything that I've ever seen, in my career in Washington. And the amount of concerted effort to destroy us through lawsuits, congressional investigations, right-wing media attacks. I mean, it's been wild.
But we have great company now, former ambassadors, former FBI directors, and a number of others, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who criticizes this president is attacked mercilessly.
Because the book is coming out now in the midst of the impeachment of Donald Trump on this Ukraine issue, I do want to ask you to talk a little bit about the Manafort factor, because there is drama, sort of personal drama, in the way that you guys write about how you had previous knowledge of Manafort. You'd looked into Manafort in your journalistic enterprises in the past and through some other Fusion research. And then when Manafort was appointed to run Trump's campaign, you were shocked for a number of reasons. Manafort also seems to be playing a pretty considerable role in the current scheme for which the president is being impeached. Rudy Giuliani has said he's been consulting with Manafort on strategy on this matter. Can you guys help people understand sort of the importance of Manafort? I think he's starting to be seen as a marginal figure here, but you saw him as really central.
We did. I mean, we didn't immediately see him. Their initial reaction when he was hired to help run the campaign was just shock and disbelief. And we just assumed that he would quickly go up in flames and would be, buried in scandal from his past. That actually didn't happen. As time went on, we began to think that he was there for a reason and that it was not a coincidence that he had joined the campaign.
What do you mean?
Well, after the Republicans changed the platform during their convention to make it softer on Ukraine, that seemed like something that Manafort probably had a hand in, and really the only beneficiary of that was Russia. So, it's a puzzle, and these pieces are starting to come together, and they make it more suspicious that something's going on here.
Just to back up half a step, Paul Manafort was one of the most ruthless Beltway bandits on the Republican side for many years, working for dictators around the world, Ferdinand Marcos, et cetera, et cetera. He popped back up in the mid-aughts, 2000s, working for Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine, who is the Putin-backed, puppet, frankly. And we worked on a lot of stories about that. And at the time, thereafter, though, he sort of disappeared. And for a while, he just really disappeared. And it turned out he was in business with Oleg Deripaska, a Russian oligarch who's very loyal to Vladimir Putin. Glenn, who's something of a wizard when it comes to public documents, turned up the fact that he was being pursued by Oleg Deripaska, for a debt he owed him.
Several $1 million of debt.
More than several hundred. Tens of millions of dollars.
And
to the point that a service processor looked for Paul Manafort in Virginia and couldn't find him. That's how off the map he was.
When Donald Trump picked him to run his campaign.
The preceding year or two. Yes. So, and the fundamental thing that we learned when we were covering Russian oligarchs and Russian corruption in the 2000s was that Putin exercises his influence in the West via his loyal oligarchs. It's an informal system, but they take direction from the Kremlin.
Glenn Simpson and Peter Fritsch are the co-founders of Fusion GPS. The book is Crime in Progress: Inside the Steele Dossier and the Fusion GPS Investigation of Donald Trump. You guys have been through hell and high water. Thanks for putting it in your own words and putting it all in one place. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Nice.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.